Following the Cumberledge First Do No Harm review, which myself and many others were part of, I was invited to be one of the patient representatives for the IMMDS review. A lot of work was undertaken after the Cumberledge report was published, and we met with many government agencies, including the Department of Health and Social Care, the NIHR, who are here today, as well as Nadine Dorries, who was the MP and the Health Minister at the time, to try and drill down, shape, and allow them to understand why it was, and it still is, so important to implement all the 9 recommendations. These meetings and their contents, as well as the outcomes, are available to view on traverse.limited website, as well as the government response on the gov.uk website. My journey started after having a hysterectomy. I was quite young, I was only 38 at the time. My ovaries weren't taken at that time. I had a life-threatening condition a week before I was due to have the operation due to a large fibroid growing through the walls of the womb, which caused so much blood loss that my organs started shutting down. This was a very, very scary episode in my life. I was kept in hospital and I was given 26 tablets a day to stop bleeding from anywhere, and also many, many blood transfusions to stabilise my body enough to have the hysterectomy. I was fortunate enough to have a great team and I recovered after this operation. But as you can see from that, having another operation was not something that I really wanted to do. Following this, 3 or 4 years later, after having difficulties emptying my bowel, I was given a proctogram which showed a 3 centimetre rectocele. I didn't know what that was. They stated that you have a small bulge between the vagina and the rectum, which is the cause of you not being able to empty your bowel. At this time, I still didn't know what that was. I was then referred to a colorectal surgeon. This is sadly where my nightmare journey began. I was not given any details. I was not offered any conservative alternatives to surgery. And although I was not impressed by this surgeon's attitude and demeanour, you trust them. So I agreed to the op after being told that it was gold standard, it will change your life for the better, words that today I still feel like kicking myself. I can't believe how trusting and naive I was. There was never a discussion regarding a mesh implant. It was only ever referred to as an LVMR operation. I was given the LVMR operation. I did not understand what it was, what it meant, wasn't given any information to make an informed choice about it, and I was not given anything in the way of fully informed consent for this procedure. The only complications given were the effects of having a general anaesthetic. Again, because you trust the surgeon and what they tell you, you just go through what they say. The effects of the mesh implant and its complications were never discussed. I started to have the same previous problems 6 to 8 months after this operation with voiding difficulties. I couldn't believe it, but I was told that this was normal and that things would settle quickly. They never did. This caused me a great deal of stress, and getting answers was not easy. I was told by my GP and others that this was very common for a woman of my age and that it was likely to be menopause or in my head. This is clearly not acceptable. Again, you go through the stress of dealing with this because you start believing what they say. For 3 years, I struggled with these issues and not getting adequate treatment or help from anywhere. In 2018, I was admitted to hospital with a blocked bowel and bladder. I was cathetered and I had enemas between September and December, and an MRI showed that the LVMR was a failure and that mesh complications and erosion was ignored. A CT scan in September during these investigations into the blockages also showed an ovarian tumour. They were unsure if this was benign or cancerous because my CA125 bloods were raised. The 2 hospitals I was under at the time were asked to do a joint operation by my oncologist to remove the tumour and the mesh. This sadly did not happen, and I had to have the ovaries and the tumour removed in 2019. Luckily, it was a benign tumour. The mesh implanting hospital stated after this that they would not remove the mesh, they would only give me a permanent stoma. So I had to seek a second opinion privately. I consider myself to be one of the lucky ones that managed to get two very good, knowledgeable private surgeons who did a total removal of the mesh in 2019. I didn't have a stoma. They got most of it out. However, there are two protects that are very dangerously placed and cannot be removed. There are still issues that I deal with daily, including permanent back issues and permanent nerve damage. I cope, many do not. I have a great GP now, as well as a really good physio. Histology that was carried out on the mesh after it was removed showed significant issues. I was told by them and the removal surgeons that I should not have any polypropylene implant again. I'm not a good candidate for it. Following the removal, I developed two large incisional hernias. I was referred to my local hospital, who advised that they would only repair it with polypropylene mesh. Therefore, I had to again get a second opinion privately, which I did with the colorectal that did my mesh removal. In November 2019, I had to have an emergency double incisional hernia repair due to bowel strangulation. I was lucky that the private surgeon was available and looked after me very well. I had a total abdominal reconstruction and a tummy tuck to use my own skin, so no mesh implant. To give you a timeline of what I went through, 2009 hysterectomy, 2014 LVMR, 2019 ovaries removal. 2019 I had to have a knee operation, and you may think that's very odd, and what's the relevance? Most patients who are affected and have complications of a mesh implant, especially bowel, affects their gait and how they stand due to pain or the placement. So therefore, that was why I had to have a knee operation. 2019, diagnostic laparoscopy. 2019, mesh removal. 2019, emergency hernia operation. 2020, aspiration of a seroma developed after hernia surgery. 2020, diagnosed with a large hiatus hernia caused by the trauma of the surgeries. 2021, I developed alopecia areata. Again, you may be thinking, what has that got to do with mesh? There's a study in Canada in 2018 by Professor Tervet that there may be a link to autoimmune disorders and autoinflammatory syndrome with polypropylene mesh implants. This shows you the extent to which mesh has and still has on my life and the lives of others, not just on your health, but the financial burden, the personal and family toll. In 2019, the implanting hospital found that I shouldn't have been given this operation, and I should have been offered alternatives. This is what gives you the momentum to start doing the support and campaign, because I could not find any other groups that could help with Rectopexy and Pexy meshes, and there was no real-time research or information either. During my own research, I got my operation notes from the LVMR operation, and I found to my horror that not only did I have Rectopexy mesh, but I had sacrocolpopexy mesh and a posterior colpopharyngy with mesh. Multiple protacts. I never gave any consent to this. This is a small excerpt of my story and mesh journey, and it has been an awful lot to go through, but I am not the only one, as many others' journeys are far more horrific than my own. However, if there had been adequate, thorough research of these mesh devices, fixings and protacts done prior, and reporting and collating of adverse effects and complications after insertions, we would now not be in the situation we're in. There was still very little research in the complications of Rectopexy mesh implants, and this needs to change. I was never asked, I was never told. I've had many, many operations and treatments besides what I have already shared, and some of them have been innovative. I had photodynamic therapy on my eye. I had appendix removal whilst I was pregnant. 4 surgeries to my knees, a Fenton's procedure, a gland removal. The latest operation I had in May was a septoplasty with turbinate removal. So I'm still very trusting of surgeons, as you can see. I feel honoured to have been asked to speak today, as my health journey in relation to my surgeries has been quite extensive and varied, and I remain hopeful and positive that together with the inclusion of a patient's voice and input for all surgeries, the innovation and thorough research can help the current landscape in all healthcare settings. Thank you. Thank you.